You already know what this is about. Not what you think it is, not what you've been told. Something deeper, something quieter, something most men never find. If this kind of content speaks to you, take a moment right now. Subscribe before we go further because what's coming requires your full attention. There is a man out there. He walks into a room. He doesn't say much. He doesn't need to. But something shifts. The air changes slightly. Not dramatically, not loudly, just differently. People notice him, not because of how he looks, not because of what he owns, but because of what he carries. Something invisible, something real. You've seen that man before. Maybe in passing, maybe in memory. Maybe you've been that man once and didn't even know it. This speech is about that man, about what he actually is, about how he got there. Not through tricks, not through performance, through something much harder, through becoming himself. Let's start with the truth, not the comfortable version, the real one. Most men spend their lives trying to be impressive. They work on the surface, the clothes, the car, the right words at the right time. And there's nothing wrong with caring about your appearance, nothing wrong with success, but those are the outside layers. And most people stop there. They build the outer wall and leave the interior empty. What makes a woman compare every other man to you has nothing to do with the wall. It has everything to do with what's behind it. Here is the first uncomfortable truth. You cannot manufacture this. You cannot buy it. You cannot learn it in a weekend. It is not a strategy. It is not a technique. It is a state of being. It is who you actually are when no one is watching, when there's nothing to gain, when there's no performance required. Who are you then? That question matters more than almost anything else. Identity is where this begins. Not confidence, not charisma. Identity, the deep, quiet knowledge of who you are, what you stand for, what you will not become, what you're building, what you're walking away from. Most men never sit with that question. They're too busy moving, too busy reacting, too busy trying to fit into some shape that was never theirs. When a man knows who he is, people feel it immediately. Not because he announces it, not because he performs it, but because every choice he makes comes from that place. Every word he speaks, every boundary he holds, every time he says no and means it, every time he says yes and means that too. There is a stillness in a man like that. It's not coldness, it's not distance, it's groundedness. It's the feeling that he cannot be blown over. Not by pressure, not by approval, not by someone else's opinion of who he should be. That is attractive in a way that cannot be explained rationally. It bypasses logic. It goes straight to something primal, something ancient, the recognition of solidity, the recognition of a man who has roots. Let's talk about what this is not, because the contrast matters. It is not arrogance. Arrogance is loud. Arrogance needs witnesses. Arrogance is actually a form of insecurity dressed in expensive clothing. The man who talks loudly about himself is trying to convince someone, maybe the room, maybe himself. What we're talking about is quieter, much quieter. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't collapse when no one is watching. It exists regardless of the audience. That is the difference. Most men are performing. They have been performing since they were boys, performing toughness, performing confidence, performing indifference. They've worn so many masks they've forgotten what their actual face looks like. And women feel that. Not always consciously, but they feel it. The way you feel a draft in a room. You don't always know where it's coming from, but you feel the cold. A man who has dropped, the performance doesn't feel like that. He feels like something solid, something consistent, something you can actually trust. Not because he said you can trust him, not because he tried to prove it, but because he simply is the same person in every room, in every circumstance, at every moment. That consistency, that is rare. That is the thing people carry with them long after you've left the room, long after the conversation ended. They remember how you made them feel, not what you said, not what you wore, how you made them feel. And what you made them feel was grounded, present, real. Now let's go deeper because identity alone is not the whole picture. The next layer is self-respect, and this one is uncomfortable because most men confuse self-respect with pride. They are not the same thing. Pride is about how others see you. Self-respect is about how you see yourself. Pride needs validation. Self-respect already has it. A man with genuine self-respect does not chase. He does not beg. He does not shrink himself to fit into someone else's comfort. He does not abandon his own values for the sake of approval. He also doesn't punish people for not choosing him. He doesn't become bitter. He doesn't become cynical. He simply moves with dignity, with clarity, with no debt on his shoulders and no victim story in his mouth. That is one of the hardest things a man can do, especially after being hurt, especially after being overlooked, especially after working hard and being taken for granted. The easy thing is bitterness. The easy thing is to close down, to stop trying, to become the man who says that nothing matters and no one is worth it. But that man is not the one people compare others to. That man becomes invisible in the worst way. Not quiet, not still, just hollow. The man we're talking about chose the harder path. He chose to remain open without being naive. He chose to care without losing himself. He chose to keep building even when no one was watching. That choice is visible even when it's silent. Now let's talk about purpose because this might be the most important piece. There is nothing more grounding than a man who knows what he is building. Not what he is chasing, not what he is reacting to, what he is actually building. The man who is building something doesn't have time to perform. He doesn't have time to prove himself to every person in every room. He is oriented. He has direction. Purpose gives a man a quality that is nearly impossible to fake. Focus. Real focus is not busyness. It's not a full calendar. It's not someone who's always rushing. Real focus is a man who knows what his next step is, who returns to that step regardless of distraction, who doesn't get pulled off course by every opinion and opportunity that presents itself. Women can feel that. Everyone can feel that. A man with real purpose doesn't pull people toward him by trying. He pulls people toward him by simply living his life so fully and deliberately that people want to be near it, not because they need something from him, but because his presence reminds them that something real is possible, that a life with actual direction is not a fantasy. That is magnetic. That is what people remember, not the performance, the purpose. Let's sit with something uncomfortable. Now, some men reading this are doing everything right on paper. They're successful. They're in shape. They're reliable. They show up. But something is still off. And the reason is this: they are doing all those things for someone else. They are working hard so that someone will choose them. They are improving so that someone will see the value. They are present and reliable and strong because they are hoping that will be enough. But here is the quiet tragedy of that. When you do things for that reason, people feel it. Not always immediately, but eventually. There's a neediness underneath the effort, a transaction beneath the appearance of giving. The man who is different does all of those things because they align with who he is not to be chosen, because this is his life and he refuses to live it carelessly. That distinction changes everything, because you can feel the difference between a man who is kind because it wins him something and a man who is kind because it is who he is, between a man who is patient because he's hoping you'll notice and a man who is patient because impatience doesn't serve him. One feels like a strategy, the other feels like a person. People compare others to the person, not the strategy. Let's move into something even deeper. Masculine grounding. This phrase gets used a lot, and most of the time it's connected to force, to dominance, to volume. But real masculine grounding is something else entirely. It is a man's ability to hold his position without the need to fight for it. When someone challenges him, he doesn't crumble, but he also doesn't rage. He simply holds. When things go wrong, he doesn't panic. He doesn't spiral. He slows down. He gets quiet. He finds the ground beneath his feet again, and he takes the next step. When he is uncertain, he doesn't pretend to know. He says he doesn't know, and he moves toward knowing without shame, without apology. That kind of man is not a fantasy, but he is rare, and his rarity is exactly why he becomes the standard. People don't compare every other person to someone ordinary. They compare to someone who made them feel like they were seen, like they were in the presence of something real. Being truly present is one of the rarest things in the world. Most people are everywhere except where they are. Their body is in the room, but their mind is somewhere else. In the past, in the worry, in the phone, in the comparison. A present man is different. When he's in a conversation, he's in it fully. When he's listening, he's actually listening. not waiting for his turn to talk, not forming his response, listening. That kind of presence makes people feel like the most important person in the room, not because of flattery, because of attention, because of genuine interest. And people carry that with them for months, for years, long after the details fade. The feeling stays. You walked into a room once and someone made you feel completely heard. You remember that person, don't you? That is what we're talking about. That is what leaves a mark. Let's talk about emotional depth, because this is where many men get lost. Society has spent a long time telling men to cut off emotion, to be unaffected, to never let anything show. And so many men have followed that instruction so well that they've genuinely lost access to what they feel. And the result is a hollow quality, an absence where depth should be. People can feel the emptiness even if they can't name it. The man who has done his inner work is different. He feels things deeply. And he doesn't deny that, but he also doesn't drown in it. He knows the difference between expressing emotion and being controlled by it. He can feel grief and still make a decision. He can feel fear and still take action. He can feel love and still maintain his identity. That integration of strength and depth is something that most people have rarely encountered. And when they do encounter it, they cannot forget it because it represents a completeness, a wholeness. A man who has not broken into the public half and the hidden half, but is simply one thing, the same in the darkness as in the light. That wholeness is what people compare others to. Not the biceps, not the bank account, the wholeness. Let's be honest about something now. Becoming this man is not easy. It is not a shortcut. It is not a program you complete and then you're done. It is a daily practice, a daily choosing. Choosing honesty when dishonesty would be easier. Choosing presence when distraction is everywhere. Choosing your values when the crowd is moving the other direction. Choosing growth when comfort is right there. Most men make the other choice. Most men choose the easier thing, and most men spend their lives wondering why something feels hollow. The hollow feeling is the gap between who you are and who you know you could be. And no amount of external success fills that gap. No achievement, no recognition, no relationship. Only the internal work fills it. Only the honest confrontation with yourself. What am I avoiding? What am I pretending? Where am I performing instead of living? What would I do if I truly stopped caring about other people's approval? Those questions are not comfortable, but they are the most important questions a man can ask himself. Because on the other side of those questions is clarity, and clarity is power, not loud power, not forceful power. The quiet power of a man who knows exactly who he is and exactly where he's going. That man changes the rooms he walks into. He doesn't try to. He simply does. Because clarity is contagious. Purpose is contagious. Groundedness is contagious. When people encounter a man like that, something in them responds. Something ancient. Something that recognizes what a human being at their best actually looks like. And they carry that with them forever. Let's come to the final layer, the one that holds everything else together. Integrity. Not integrity as a buzzword, not integrity as a brand, integrity as alignment. The alignment of what you believe with what you say with what you do with who you claim to be. Most people live with a crack in that alignment, a small one usually, but a crack is still a crack. And over time, cracks become gaps, and gaps become fractures. And fractures become the reason a man doesn't recognize himself in the mirror. Integrity maintenance is the most important work a man can do. Not the most exciting, not the most visible, but the most important because everything stands on it. Your relationships stand on it. Your reputation stands on it. Your self-respect stands on it. Your ability to look yourself in the eye without flinching stands on it. And people feel integrity the same way they feel its absence. You know when someone is solid. You know when the ground beneath them is firm. You know when their word means something. That knowing is not always conscious, but it is always present, and it shapes every interaction, every memory, every comparison. The man who cannot be replaced in someone's mind is the man who was actually real, who showed up as himself, who held his word, who was the same person whether the stakes were high or low, whether he was being watched or not, whether there was something to gain or not. That man is not a myth. He is not an impossible standard. He is the version of you that is possible when you do the work. When you stop performing, when you stop chasing, when you stop measuring yourself by how many people approve of you and start measuring yourself by how closely your life reflects your values, that is when the shift happens. Not overnight, not dramatically, quietly, slowly, the way all real things grow. One more truth before we close. You will not be everyone's standard. That is not the goal. The goal is not to be compared favorably by every person in every room. The goal is to become the kind of man whose presence means something to the right people in the right moments and to yourself, most importantly to yourself. Because at the end of all of this, the only comparison that permanently matters is the one you make every morning between the man you are and the man you know you're capable of being. Close that gap slowly, every day. Not perfectly, but honestly. That is the work. That is the whole work. Everything else follows. The respect follows. The presence follows. The impact follows. The relationships follow. The quality of your life follows. Not because you chase them, because you became the man they naturally come toward. That man already exists in you, not as a finished product, as a direction, as a possibility, as a choice you get to make every single day. Choose it quietly, consistently, without needing applause, without needing recognition, just because it is who you are choosing to become. That is the whole answer. That is what makes a man unforgettable. That is what makes a man the standard that others are measured against. Not loudness, not performance, just the slow, steady, unglamorous work of becoming real. If this reached something in you today, subscribe because this kind of work requires reminders, requires a voice that returns you to what matters. We'll be here building slowly,